So this is the M35, a reusable point and shoot 35mm camera from Kodak. And I wanted to try one out to see if it is a better and more sustainable option to non-reusable disposable point and shoots. So the M35 has a fixed focal length, one element lens, which is 31mm f10, and it shoots automatically at 120th of a second. And that's it. You have literally no control. The only control that you have is the ISO of the film that you put in, and it recommends you to use ISO 200 or 400 film. You do have a little point out flash, and the camera takes one AAA battery. You can here, it's literally just made of ABS plastic. The build quality is terrible, obviously, but that's not the point of this camera. It's not designed to be anything more than what it is, which is a reusable 35mm camera, no frills, simple point and shoot, and hopefully, as I said, this can keep disposables out of landfill. Now, in order to give the M35 the best possible chance, I went out to trial it and I used a roll of Portra 400, which admittedly cost almost as much as the camera itself, but I figured I might as well give it the best possible chance. However, as soon as I went out when it was relatively sunny after it had been raining, so the sunlight was quite bright. It was kind of that late afternoon light before sunset, and as soon as I got out, I started metering and soon realised that I was going to have to push this Portra 400 to full stops in order to try and get anything salvageable whatsoever. Even pushing the film 2 stops, and even pushing a superior film like Portra 400 2 stops, the vast majority of the frames that I got back were trash. Absolutely awful, full of grain, super contrasty, really muddy blacks, and you couldn't really use the vast majority of them. There were 2 or 3 that were kind of usable. After I'd been out, I actually came into here in the studio and shot this picture of Sam, which actually I really quite like. If you're gonna really like lean into that like sort of super low quality, super contrasty look, then it can work. But it really just highlighted to me that because that lens is f10, it does shoot at 120th of a second, you are really restricted by this camera. Now, yes, you have got that pop-out flash, but that's only really good for something that's really close up, where that flash is actually going to brighten it up. Anything like I was trying to shoot outside, that flash is going to do next to nothing. So for me, this camera is only really usable in 2 scenarios. One, when it's a really sunny day outside and you know that that light is going to stay the same for the length of when you're shooting, because any change in lighting is going to change the exposure of those frames, and you're not going to get any consistency unless you've got consistent light. The other option is if you're shooting like events or nights out where it's really dark anyway, and you're just going to be using that flash and you're just taking pictures of the people and things that are immediately around you, where that flash is actually going to do some use. For me, there's just not enough control. If there was some kind of function where you could choose between shooting, say, f10 and f5.6, or shooting 120th of a second or a 60th of a second, just something that gave you a little bit of control to go between 2 different lighting scenarios, it'd be so much better. But the fact that you are really restricted to, you need the perfect conditions for f10, 120th of a second, and whatever ISO film you've got in, it's just too restricting for me. And I think that for the price, there are far better alternatives that are still much more sustainable than using disposable cameras. So the first alternative is something like this. This is my Olympus Muse Zoom point and shoot. Not necessarily this one, because these have skyrocketed in price recently, but anything that's kind of a small point and shoot, you can pop it in your pocket. The build quality on these is far better than the M35, and because these are all second hand, you can pick them up for 15, 20, 25, 30 pounds. No problem. Just get on eBay, type in point and shoot, and as long as the listing says that it's working, you're pretty much guaranteed to get a camera that's better quality than the M35. The vast majority of these are going to have variable apertures and variable shutter speeds. Most of them will do all that work for you anyway, so you still get the whole benefit of a point and shoot, which is that you literally open it up, look, take your shot, and that's it. And the results that you're going to get are going to be infinitely better than with the M35. None of these are going to be single element lenses either. None of these, I would imagine, will have a single plastic element like the M35. So I think that this is definitely a much better alternative for a very similar price. Next alternative is something like this. So an old school SLR. So this is just my Canon 3000N, and it's just got a 50mm 1.8 lens on there. The body itself of this cost me £13 because I got two of them for £26 off eBay. And then I think the lens was about 35 quid, but any Canon lens that you're going to put onto something like this, or Nikon lens or Pentax or whatever model you go for, if you get an SLR, you've got complete control. You're going to be able to choose your aperture, you're going to be able to choose your shutter speed as well, and also a lot of these are going to actually meter the images for you, so you know you're not going to get really muddy shots, really blown out shots. And again, for not much more than the M35, you get build quality, you get far superior lens quality, and again, the main thing for me is you get that control. And again, with these, the second hand, so they're actually even more sustainable than the M35 because these are already in existence. And again, it's not going to be a disposable that ends up in landfill. And finally, my wildcard pick for an alternative is something like the Instax SQ6. So there's loads of different ones of these. There's the Instax Mini, there's the Instax Wide. They even now do a kind of digital hybrid where you've got a screen, it's got internal memory, you can view the pictures before you print them out, which is really, really good because it means you're not going to be wasting the film, which is relatively expensive, it has to be said. But if you're just looking for that kind of fun point and shoot, like I hate to say it, but like hipster kind of vibe, then again, something like this, literally take your shot, point, shoot, you've got that instant feedback as well of getting the film back. So yeah, I think that this is definitely an alternative. They are much more expensive. I think the SQ6 is about 80 or 90 quid. I think the Wide is even more, the Mini's a little bit less. And the film is expensive, but then again, all film is expensive. So yeah, I think this is a nice fun alternative. So my final thoughts on the Kodak M35. Now, I do feel like I've been a little bit harsh towards it. And to be fair, that probably comes from the fact that I'm a professional photographer looking at something that's really, really not designed for me. The vast majority of people that buy this are probably going to be using the pop-out flash. They're going to be using it at night, taking pictures of their friends, and it's probably going to work for them. For me, though, I just don't think that this is designed for me. I think that there are far better alternatives for not much more money, and I just wish that they'd made this 50% more expensive but 50% better, because I do think that it really is almost there. If it just offered you some small modicum of control, it would be so much better. I do think that the idea of it is fantastic. I do think that something like this, which it could be a viable alternative to disposable cameras, and means that we are wasting less disposable cameras, not having these things that are literally built, used, and then thrown straight in landfill. I think the idea of it is fantastic, and it's definitely a step in the right direction. It's just that for me, it's just not quite good enough. You need to have glorious light or be shooting indoors, and for both of those things, I already carry something that can do that in my pocket every single day anyway, along with it being my phone, my internet device, my calendar. I just think that what I can get from my iPhone far outweighs this, and the computational photography that is contained in my iPhone makes it far smarter than this. And that way, I don't even need to buy this, let alone a disposable camera. So it's kind of almost there, but not quite. I know that they have released I think it's an M36 or an M38, which is kind of an updated version of this. I'll pop that on the screen now. Hopefully that has a little bit more control. But for me, the M35, it's kind of close but no cigar. Anyway, I hope that you've enjoyed this video. I hope that it shed a little bit of light. I apologise for the absolute trash images that you've seen on this, but that's this camera's fault, hopefully, not mine. Other than that, thank you so much for watching, and as always, I'll see you in the next video.